Despite its condemnation in official documents, the so-called Galatian decree of the late 4th century, Protevangelium of James dominated the development of the Marian legend for centuries. Neither in this document nor in any other material is there any clear evidence of a reliable historical tradition about Mary unrelated to what was said of her in the canonical Gospels. And some of this literature that we find in the 2nd century about Mary, frankly, is docetic. For the Docetists, from the Greek word dokein, meaning to seem, to appear, the Docetists exaggerated the divinity of Christ. To them, the body of Jesus only appeared to be real. Thus, the synoptic passage about Jesus' true family that Tony was just referring to in Mark is taken in this literature as a denial of his humanity. That's how they got around that. The Marian picture, folks, is very scant when we look at the early patristic writings. Most don't even mention Mary. The principal exceptions are the proto-Orthodox Ignatius of Antioch, Justin the Martyr, and Irenaeus of Lyon. St. Ignatius of Antioch gives an early extra-biblical witness to Jesus' virginal conception. At least that's how it appears. In his epistle to the Smyrnaeans, he writes, He, Jesus, was truly of the seed of David, according to the flesh, and the Son of God, according to the will and power of God, that he was truly born of a virgin. Question, what does he mean by virgin there? Physical virgin, right? Meaning her hymen was not damaged? Yes or no? Yeah. If you say yes, how would you know that?
Because it was the spirit overshadowing her.
Sure. I believe that Mary physically was a virgin with the church's teaching. We're not talking about what I believe. We're talking about what Ignatius of Antioch believed and what he's actually saying there. What's the context? Moving right along. Just want you to think, to grapple with these things. 1,000 difficulties don't equal one doubt. St. Justin Martyr's interest in Mary serves a Christological and soteriological purpose. The reason he's talking about Mary is because he wants to work out a theology of Christ, and he's working out a theology of our redemption and salvation, soteriology and Christology. Theology of Christ, Christology. Theology, theological study, theological reflection, critical reflection, theology of our salvation, soter, right? For Justin Martyr, Jesus' birth from a virgin, what does he mean by that? Is proof of his messiahship and a sign of a new time. Justin draws a typological parallel between the Virgin Eve and the Virgin Mary. Eve believed and obeyed the dragon. Mary believed and obeyed the angel. Thus, Eve became the mother of sin through her disobedience, and Mary became the mother of the one who destroyed the works of the serpent through her obedience. See, Justin Martyr can do that because already people in the Jesus group had been reflecting on the church as Eve. He doesn't just jump right to Mary. He sees Mary as a type of the church. And therefore he can think if church is a type of Eve, it makes sense that Mary is a type of the church. Mary's a type of Eve. You notice this isn't coming from warm, fuzzy, sentimental kind of feelings about Mary. Let's defend Mary against the Protestants and nobody's going to knock my mom like that. I'm not saying, it's not coming from that. It's coming from his understanding of Christ. That's Justin Martyr. St. Irenaeus of Lyon finally spells out the basis of this Eve-Mary typology by showing its parallel to Paul's Adam-Christ typology. Justin Martyr couldn't really do that because Justin Martyr wouldn't touch Paul with a 10-foot pole. But Irenaeus did. Irenaeus is the earliest of the church fathers to explicitly identify Mary and the church with one another. Something implied only in Lucan symbolism and Johannine symbolism in the New Testament. Mary, the church, in Irenaeus, is the new Eve, the mother of a new humankind, in whom God made a new beginning. It didn't take a vast amount of time for the church to make this leap, for the groundwork had already been laid in texts that would make up our canonical New Testament. Paul already made a typology between Adam and Christ in Corinthians and Romans. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians, "For because death is through a human, so also the resurrection from the dead is through a human. For just as in Adam all die, so also in Christ will all be made alive." By the way, he's not saying anything biological there, St. Augustine. He's not trying to give the biological reason why things die. He's just finding a relationship between Adam and Christ, between a deficient, sick humanity, really Israelite humanity, and now a spiritualized humanity. He expands this idea later on in Romans. Therefore, just as through one person, sin entered the world, and through sin, death. And thus death came to all, inasmuch as all shamed God. For up to the time of the law, dishonoring God, sin was in the world. Though sin, dishonoring God, is not accounted when there is no law, but death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who did not sin after the pattern of the trespass of Adam, who is the type of one who is to come, Jesus. So I'm not going to continue. We could go on and on with this, but you see the point of what I'm trying to make. Paul already lays out this groundwork that Adam is a type of Christ. The Ark of the Covenant is a type of the church. Eve is a type of the church. Well, not yet. But as people continue to develop Paul's thought, eventually people in the church came to that conclusion. 2 Corinthians, Paul says, "For I am jealous of you with the jealousy of God, since I betrothed you," marital imagery, "I betrothed you, Corinthian Jesus group, to one husband, to present you as a chaste virgin." What does he mean by virgin? Does he mean anything about her sexual status? Well, here he does. Chaste. "Virgin to Christ, Messiah. But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts may be corrupted from a sincere and pure commitment to Christ." Wow, he just implied that the Corinthian Jesus group, that Eve is a type of the Corinthian Jesus group. Elsewhere he has Adam as a type of Christ. Later in the Deutero-Pauline letter to the Ephesians, we find the church being called the bride of Christ, Ephesians 5:21-32. "Be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives should be subordinate to their husbands as to the Lord." Please don't apply this to 20th century marching orders for people. Doggone it, guys. I've heard young men getting ordained give lectures about this, as if this is marching orders for all time and all cultures. "For the husband is head of his wife, just as Christ is head of the ecclesia," the Jesus group. "He himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the Jesus group, the church, the ecclesia, and handed himself over for her to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle, or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish." The Gospels abound with bridal and wedding symbolism. Elsewhere in the New Testament, the church is theologized as the bride of Christ also. Yes, Richard. Somebody had a question. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
No question. I have no problem with Ephesians as far as that reading.
Great.
Because when you look at what Christ did for the church, I being the church, we being the church, Christ was crucified for the church.
Right.
So if my husband is supposed to be like Christ, I would much rather have him crucified than me. Okay.
I love that. That works. That works beautiful.
Okay.
Here's the thing, though.
I have no problem with
Is the author of Ephesians? My point is not that. My point is I do have a problem with the letter of Ephesians, chapter 5 of the letter, being taken and interpreted to mean this is something being laid down as a model to be explicitly followed outside, ripped bleeding out of its first century context, as if the writer of that text is writing this for people on space stations in the year 3500.
Okay, I understand.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
But I love what you just said. I think that's very funny, and also there's truth to it, ringing it.
Exactly.
We need to be, the woman is not a lesser human being.
Correct.
She is an equal and another expression of what it means to be Chadam, humankind. And there are more than just our cultural current expressions of what it means. I'm sorry if this offends people. Of how our culture articulates, or even first century Israelite culture articulates man and woman. I'm sorry, let's not be myopic. There are many ways to express human being. Not just our cultural, ethnocentric way. Okay? That's all I'm saying.
That reading can be used for weddings. That's one of the readings that you can select when you can select.
Fantastic. And it should never be interpreted as marching orders. It should be interpreted as mystical literature. And it's being mystically applied to the relationship that is being celebrated and turned toward the community in the ecclesia, which is the wedding, the sacramental marriage that is taking place. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it being celebrated in masses, at a wedding ceremony. I'm fine with that being read by couples. I'm not fine with that being used to justify a husband beating the crap out of his wife. No way. For her salvation. And you're going to tell me that hasn't been done like that before? It absolutely has been used that way before. Or to say that a woman should be quiet and not express herself and doesn't have any place in theology or coming to the table to discuss the mystery of Christ. No, I'm sorry. My accepting that these documents are inspired does not mean that they are omni-applicable to all cultures at all times in the same way. No. And yes, I have to stand up for that. The same way that I have to celebrate Mary, the Anawim, who had no voice, that we say is Queen of Heaven. Well, we got to put our money where our mouth is and start walking the walk and treating peoples who have been marginalized and genders that have been marginalized they also are a type of Mary. Okay. Revelation 11. Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding day of the Lamb has come. Constellation Aries. His bride has made herself ready. She was allowed to wear a bright, clean linen garment. The linen represents the righteous deeds of the holy ones. Then the angel, the constellation, the sky servant, said to me, write this, blessed are those who have been called to the wedding feast of the Lamb. Don't we say that? We say that at Mass. And he said to me, these words are true. They come from God. Revelation 21, 1-2. Then I saw a new sky vault and a new earth. The former sky vault and the former earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I also saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of sky vault from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Revelation 22:17. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let the hearer say, come. Let the one who thirsts come forward, and the one who wants it receive the gift of life-giving water. Thus we exit the first century, seeing that Jesus groups had all the seeds planted for an ecclesiology that sees the church as a woman, which then gives seed and rise to seeing Mary as bride and daughter and virgin daughter and bride and mother. The church is the bride of Christ from the New Testament documents we see. Adam is a type of Christ. Eve is a type of the church. We just saw that. And we saw in our first formation session, Mary in the New Testament, that New Testament Mariologies of Luke and John depict Mary as a symbol of and inexorably tied to the church. We all following this? I'm showing you how the pieces came together. If it had been configured a different way, if all we had was Mark, would we be able to do that? We wouldn't be able to do that. But we have Luke and John. And we have Paul. Paul didn't even care about Mary. He didn't write about her. But Paul does care about the Jesus groups. And then after Paul died, his disciples really cared about the Jesus groups. Are we going to stick together? How? What are the rules? And so they expanded these ideas and developed these ideas. When stuck together with Luke and John and the book of Revelation, suddenly what do we have? We have the stuff to make Mariology with.